Living Dead Girl is a contender for the hardest hitting genre film. It's a movie that has probably the strongest finale of any of his films. It's a real gut punch, and I challenge you, I dare you to watch it through to the end and then say that the final scene is forgettable. Also, it's a movie that has that distinction of being a cult gore film where the majority of the splatter effects were made by a teenager, Benoît Lestang, who went on to become a very respected makeup special effects artist in France. He was like 17 when he approached Jean Rollin to work on Living Dead Girl, and he created all those finger poking, eye gouging effects in the movie, which are some of the movie's most memorable gore highlights. So that's pretty cool. Living Dead Girl is probably also the final Jean Rollin movie which he managed to put together before his budgets began to decline. I'll just list a few things I love about it and a few things which I find a bit dubious, so I'll just keep it very direct. First of all, the colors in Living Dead Girl. It's one of the better preserved prints in the Jean Rollin collection. So when you watch his movies on Blu-ray, you notice that even some of the famous ones, they have quite a bit of degrading. The prints have not been preserved so well. But when it comes to Living Dead Girl, it's you could say by Jean Rollin standards, it's in pristine condition. It looks a bit sharper, and the colors are a lot more robust than some of his other movies. I like that, and it's just a joy to watch. Initially, it's just a celebration of colors. Even though the film itself is a bit naive in places, but still, compared to more contemporary digitally shot movies, I think it has that lovely analog touch. You know, the lush greenery in the countryside scenes. It's just beautiful. And that brings me on to another thing I really liked about Living Dead Girl is the nighttime scenes are so atmospheric. There are those great sort of spotlight scenes with the brickwork, with those kind of gothic vaulted ceilings, and all the darker scenes were really atmospheric. Some of them a bit grainy, but I just thought this was like how you expect a decent European genre horror movie to look and feel. That was great. Another thing is Françoise Blanchard as the monster, as the titular character. She is so creepy. I just thought that mane of blonde hair and that pale dress and her blank stare, those large eyes. I completely forgot how empty her character works in a creepy way. You could almost like think some existential questions into her character which weren't necessarily there, but she just was so good at portraying this living corpse. I just thought she was magnificent. And she went on to do this a lot less known Rollin movie called Sidewalks of Bangkok, where she has a completely different hairdo and plays a completely different character. You can really see her range there a bit. She was also in a similar part in Jess Franco's movie, in the re-edit of The Fall of the House of Usher, which is called Neurosis for you, Rossini, where she kind of again plays a living corpse. So I guess she specializes in those kind of parts. Another thing I really liked about Living Dead Girl is the gore. I mean, this movie is probably like a highlight reel of gore scenes, and they come on pretty fast in the early scenes where we see like 2 or 3 graphic murders, and there is like faces melting off, and it's all very soggy and handmade, and it's not always convincing, but you can tell it was like real artisans crafting those interesting mutilations and everything with a real passion to it. So it's really nice to see that. It's like the really delightful 1980s gory flick. And another thing I really found awesome in the Living Dead Girl was the setting, this kind of countryside. It reminded me a little bit of Zombie Lake, with that kind of quaint village with lots of lush greenery. And like the middle of the movie is a bit padded, so we don't get to see much action, but we see those supporting characters wander around the village. There is like a long market scene, which is like cinema verite, where they kind of roam around the stalls with a handheld camera, and it's irrelevant to the movie, and you can see the passers-by look right down the camera lens. So it's like a time capsule. I'm watching how the village ladies were wearing those kind of frumpy coats and frocks and things like that. It's just terrific watching it today, and it's also captured in very vivid color. It's like a postcard from the early 1980s rural France. So those scenes were, in terms of storytelling, completely redundant, but so much fun to watch, just from that kind of time travel, time capsule point of view. And some of the stuff I was not so keen on in Living Dead Girl was that there is quite a long flashback establishing the Living Dead Girl's connection to her friend. And it's a bit painful, I gotta say. Jean Rollin is not somebody who's keen on working with actors, giving them motivation. He just puts them in front of the camera and lets it roll. So that's adults, and in that scene there is like children characters, and I think when Rollin has kids, he's at his worst. Like there is this art house kind of short feature he made, which is called Lost in New York, and I think that's his worst acted film because he's got like children in it, and the same is with the flashbacks in Living Dead Girl. They go on forever, and they're also accompanied with this really syrupy, kind of soppy music from Philippe Darram, and that music really didn't work for me, which that's my next point. I thought Philippe Darram's music was of variable quality in Living Dead Girl. Some of it where it's just like the opening credits, there was just some sound effects and drums that was quite good because it was unusual, but then when he plays that sweet kind of sentimental music, it's just really cringe-worthy. I couldn't believe it. It just cheapened the movie so much. Also, I was not a huge fan of the middle part of the movie, where I don't think Jean Rollin even shot that, because it's like two English-speaking non-actors kind of prancing around the village and stuff. So I mean, it's fun in a silly way, but it really takes a long time to wade through that filler footage, and I think that really hurts the movie, because you can tell there was like a plot, you know, there wasn't enough plot to sustain like a 90-minute feature, so they really had to you know, beef it up with some cartilage, you know, so that wasn't so awesome. And the sentimental touch in The Living Dead Girl is probably another thing. In every Jean Rollin, there is a sentimental scene, at least one, or a theme, like, you know, when they talk about race and snails, and there is that imaginary made-up memory in my favorite Rollin, which is The Night of the Hunted. There is always some kind of, when the characters get together, usually two women, and they talk about, you know, something they lived through as kids together, and it's always really, you can see it working maybe in the short story on the page, but the way Rollin stages it, it really depends. And I think when it comes to Living Dead Girl, I think that sentimental part kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It depends on my mood. In some of his movies I find it okay, but in Living Dead Girl I found it was a real clash in terms of contrast towards the film's more hard-hitting gore scenes. I think it's The Living Dead Girl is Jean Rollin's scariest film, because when the monster Catherine, the Living Dead Girl, when she just comes out the door and just jumps on somebody and, you know, kind of hurts them, but she has these scary, nasty fingernails. Also, if you see her toenails in the movie, it's like really realistic. You can tell she's been in a casket for a while. And she just comes out of nowhere and pounces on people, and you know, kind of there is all the blood spurts, and the effects are not so brilliant, but the way it's edited together, it's spontaneous. And all that screaming, I mean, it's a dubbed movie for the most part, but all that screaming, I think the dubbing actors really put in some passion. There is like terrifying screams, which is something I really associate with Rollin's movies. Like the acting, the dialogue is very stilted and theatrical, but when they're shouting and shrieking, it always comes across very naturalistic and like blood curdling. So there is like more psychological gore maybe than physiological bloodletting in this film. And when Catherine is skulking around with her pale face and that white dress, and she's this tall, odd figure. I'm not a fan of kind of Frankenstein-like characters. I don't really give a crap about that, but she's so good, and this kind of interpretation of a living dead, of a living corpse, I found magnificent and quite scary. I mean, I don't find that many movies scary these days, but yeah, I just thought Francoise Blanchard as the monster really added some. She was just so empty. I really enjoyed that. So Living Dead Girl, I haven't seen it in a while. Last time I saw it was probably on tape many years ago. So I'm so glad I revisited it, and it just really went up in my overall Jean Rollin top 5. You know, I think it's climbing its way up to the top because I forgot just how good it works as a pure genre film, and the successful gore highlights and the terrifying psychological terror scenes. I think they make me overlook the film's blatant problems, which is a lack of plot and general kind of muddled narrative. So I'm really fond of this film.